Here's what I'd like to do. I would like to give you something of an update, and then I will spend the rest of the time answering your questions. And to anyone who has a question that the Daisy doesn't pull out, I am not leaving until everyone's question is answered. All three of the other freshmen today, Jeff Duncan, Nick Mulvaney, and Tim Scott, we are in South Carolina so incredibly blessed, I think, to have those three guys. I'll leave myself out of it. I'm the slow zebra in the group. But those guys are wonderful people. They understand what happened in November. They get it. Tim is on Transportation and Infrastructure. He's also on the Rules Committee, which is so good for South Carolina. Nick Mulvaney's on budget, so when you hear me talking about the budget tonight, you hear me talking about Paul Ryan, I'm also talking about Nick Mulvaney. Jeff Duncan, who took Congressman Barrett's place in the 3rd Congressional District. Jeff is on Homeland Security, he's on Small Business, and he's on Foreign Affairs. Whether it's the port, whether it's analyzing trade agreements, I hope that you're proud. I am proud of the fact that the four of us spend a lot of time talking to one another. South Carolina is too small for us to have factions. We're too small for rivalries. The four of us don't know any better other than to work together. So I give a lot of credit to the three of them for their service in the first 40 days. We're going to get an extra congressional seat. Number 7. I have no input whatsoever on where that goes. That is up to our General Assembly. And I won't even tell you the various scenarios, but just understand, I mean, it has to go somewhere. And there are different theories about where it will go. I don't have a vote in the process. That is a decision that will be made by the House and the Senate and our governor. And probably have to be pretty clear by the Department of Justice. But to the extent that you have a chance to interact with your state legislators in Greenville, Spartanburg, or Union, and you have a perspective on the congressional districting, share it with them. I'm thrilled with the way the 4th Congressional District looks now. I'd rather have Greenville and Spartanburg and Union together and a little bit of Lawrence than anything in the world, and that's my hope, that it can stay as intact as it can. The reality is we have too much population, and we're going to have to get rid of some of that. And I don't want to be the one making the decision on what to get rid of. So, all right, let's move on to the next one. My part of talking to you tonight is going to be about fiscal matters. So if everything I tell you is bad news, it's because it's the truth. But I want you to understand the chronology. Last week, we voted on a continuing resolution to keep the government funded until September. All right, for the first time, and none of us should be putting our shoulders out of joint, patting ourselves on the back, but you need to know it is the first time in the history of the United States Congress that they actually voted to cut money. The House is one half of the equation. It will go to the Senate. I understand that it is DOA in the Senate. What will happen over the next couple of weeks and months will be a series of back and forths. And just so there's no misunderstanding the position of the Republicans in the House. I got a phone call from an old Sunday school teacher whose son works for the Department of Justice. Great guy. Owns a Christian bookstore in Spartanburg. His son works for the United States Department of Justice as a computer expert. He was asking about the government shutdown. I've not heard a single soul in Washington who wants that to happen. By the same token, I have not heard a single soul come up to me and say the status quo is acceptable. So I think we got the message in the House. Whether or not the message was received in the Senate remains to be seen. You will see a series, I think, of short-term continuing resolutions. And if there are not cuts in them, then the House is not going to be able to pass them. So we don't want that to happen. We don't want it shut down. We want it slow down. But if everybody didn't get the same message in November, then I don't know what we're going to do other than and see if the issues were joined, to use a legal phrase. Paul Ryan, whom I'm going to show a picture of in a second, is the chairman of the Budget Committee. He's from Wisconsin, which I think is still a state. Been watching well, I'm watching Libya or Wisconsin on the news, but Paul is a brilliant guy. He is one of the sharpest things we have going for us, in my judgment. I'm biased, obviously. Everybody may not have that perspective, but very sharp guy. The budget will be put forth sometime between April 15th and April 30th. What impresses me, and I'm going to show you a slide why that impresses me. What impresses me about what Paul is going to do is he is going to take on entitlements. And I will prove to you in a second why that has to be done. And it would be unfair and not leadership, not government, for us to continue to kick the entitlement can down the road and let other Congresses and other people deal with it. Paul says that's not going to happen. I believe him. He's a person of his word. We'll talk about the debt limit next, but let's go to the next slide. Well, there it is, right there. It's the only time I've ever seen him smile, and you're going to see why in a second. All right, this is not a Republican slide. It's not a Democrat slide. It's not an independent slide. These are the facts. It's one thing I love about math. It's either right or it's not right. Chris Von Holland is the ranking member on the Budget Committee. Paul Ryan is the chair. They would both agree with these numbers. We may disagree on how we got here, and we may disagree on how to get out of it, but nobody disagrees. These are the numbers. So what we did with the continuing resolution, now keep in mind, this budget is $1.5 trillion out of balance. $1.5 trillion for just 1 year's budget. Nobody knows what $1 trillion is. And $1 trillion, that is a staggering sum. We're $1.5 trillion over budget for this budget. All right, you add to that the cumulative debt of our country, and it's $14 trillion. So, when we cut $100 billion or $78 billion, depending on whose numbers you use, we cut it out of non-defense discretionary. And I got to tell you, there were some cuts made. I cut COPS program. That was a very hard vote for me to cast. There are other programs, and for us to debate the legitimacy of those programs is healthy and constructive. But we have to do it against the backdrop of where we are. So the notion that everything that was cut last week is a bad program, some of them were, some of them weren't. But we cut and we struggled, and we still haven't gotten it passed into law, somewhere between $78 and $100 billion out of this. Well, we're $1.5 trillion in debt for this year. So what if we just zeroed that out? What if we did away with every bit of discretionary spending? We're still $900 billion out of whack for this year alone. So you've got defense. And I'm asked from time to time, is defense off limits? We voted to cut some defense last week. Where I would differ with those is that's not the first place I look. I think national defense is the preeminent function of the federal government. So that's not the first place I look. Is there waste, fraud, and abuse in defense? There's waste, fraud, and abuse in everything, which is why I'm thrilled to serve on the oversight committee. Because one of our responsibilities is to ferret that out. Whether it's healthcare, the military, of course there's waste, fraud, and abuse. I want you to take this away from tonight if you can. Healthcare. How many of you think there may be fraud in Medicaid or Medicare?
We know it is.
All right. So there's fraud in Medicare and Medicaid. How many agencies do you think are devoted to investigating waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicare and Medicaid? 48. That in and of itself is waste, fraud, and abuse. 48 different agencies to investigate waste, fraud, and abuse. Surely to goodness that can be consolidated. Surely to goodness it can be. And one of the things I asked during the oversight hearing, because they wanted to talk about incentives to do better, my background, his background, we hear about carrots and sticks. From our perspective, the sticks work better. So until there are criminal sanctions for waste, fraud, and abuse when it comes to Medicare and Medicaid, you're not going to get anybody's attention. But let's assume that we did away with all of that, all discretionary spending, whatever good program you can think of, let's do away with it. We're still $900 billion out of whack. Well, defense is the primary function of government. That leaves what they call mandatory spending, and lest anyone think those are my terms, that's a legal term, which means if you wake up in the morning, the government is legally obligated to you either because of your status, your retirement status, your age, your military status. Those are legal obligations that the government owes. So it is the height of disingenuity to suggest that we can get our arms around our fiscal problem without entitlement reform. It is also a short plank to oblivion to tell the current folks, the current generation that is on Social Security and Medicare, that we're going to renegotiate the social contract. Because of all the challenges our country faces, the one that bothers me the most is the diminution in trust and confidence that people have in the institutions of government. Congress is at 12%. Which means they're right above contract killers in terms of public approval. Actually, they're up to 27%. But still, I mean, a quarter of the population has confidence in Congress. So if you will see that number go to zero, then start renegotiating the social contract of people who are currently drawing benefits. By the same token, we are blind if we don't tell that group of daisies and brownies that were up here leading the pledge that things have to change for their generation. We're lying to them. And I'm not going to do that. So, two things to keep in mind. I'm not good at math. I'm not going to give you a bunch of statistics. I'm going to give you a couple more slides, and then I'm going to shut up and answer your question. Two of the most sobering statistics that I have heard came from Mick Mulvaney. By 2031, all the revenue generated in this country, 2031, all the revenue generated in this country will go for entitlements and interest on debt. 2031. Some of us will make it to 2031. Our kids and grandkids, God willing, will make it to 2031. It's not like we picked a number way far in advance. Every cent raised in revenue will go for entitlements by 2031. By 2055, and I hope some of us may be around for that, and most assuredly our kids and grandkids will be. 2055, every cent raised in revenue by this country, the most powerful economy the world has ever known, will go to pay interest on the debt, and interest on the debt alone. 2055. Now that assumes some very rosy projections with respect to interest rates and inflation. Lord help us if interest rates go back to where they have been at some point in all of our lifetimes.